We are welcoming as well the folks that might be live streaming and they have to hear us. So I'm going to use this microphone and Father's going to use the other one. So I want to welcome you here this evening as we continue on with our guest speakers and learning more about our faith. And Father just asked me to do an opening prayer. So let's begin in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Power to save one. So it is with faith that does nothing in practice. It is thoroughly lifeless. Show me faith without works, and I will show you the faith that underlies my works. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Dear Lord, we thank you for this time and opportunity to gather and to express our faith, to learn our faith, to reflect upon the gift that you have given to us by your grace. Bless Father Max this evening as he shares with us his great knowledge and spirit placed within his heart. Children, the discipline, help us to grow in our desire for you. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, with you in the unity of the Spirit forever. Amen. I'll let Father Biltz give his history or story if he wants to do that, to welcome back to our this evening.
My name is Father Maximilian. I've been for Saint Dismas Ministry. I visit about 9, depending on how you try and visit all of them, usually twice a month. I have various hobbies. One, history, and church history and regular history coincide a great deal. And for anyone who listens to my homilies on a regular basis knows that I'm very much into history and also Lives of the Saints, which is another form of church history, a biography of a particular individual. There is a temptation in modern Catholicism to be very down and very put out. We see declining numbers, at least in the West. I mean, if you go to Africa or Indonesia, it's a different story. There, the church is growing, but for those of us who live in Western Catholicism, there's a lot of shrinkage, and a lot of people are discouraged by that, and there's a tendency to lose hope. But we should not lose hope for two reasons. One is because, well, God is God. God always wins in the end. And the other reason is because we often don't realize this, but things can change very quickly, very fast. Sometimes for the worse and sometimes for the better. But just to give you a couple of examples of how quickly things can change, if you were to go back in time to the year 1913 and ask them, do you think that a horribly destructive world war could break out next year and have tens of millions of Europeans kill each other? They would all say no. They'd all say, oh, we're all too sophisticated for a world war to break out. There's too much luxury, there's too much love of business. It just couldn't happen. And but as we know, it did happen. And today we're going to cover another example of how history changed very fast. And I'm going to try to be very fair and balanced. I will give you my opinions, but I will try and be very fair, so that I'm going to try to be so fair that even a secular person could watch this and he could only disagree with my interpretation, he could not disagree with the facts that I present. So we're going to hear a story of a triumph of God, of a triumph of Our Lady in a very dramatic intervention in human history. But to understand that, we need to understand some of the background of what's going on. And there's some key dates we have to know. And the first one is the year 1492. Okay. This is a key date. Most of us are very familiar with the more famous event of that year, the discovery of America by Christopher Columbus. Okay, and that was certainly an earth-shattering change, and of course that's going to be a huge part of our story, is the discovery of America. So Columbus, who was not trying to reach America, he didn't know America was there, he was trying to reach China or Indonesia. Instead, he discovered the Caribbean, what today we call the Caribbean. I can't quite remember which particular island he landed on, but it was in one of the small islands of the Caribbean. The Spanish very quickly, of course, set up base on Cuba, even though Columbus discovered island that did not become their headquarters. It wasn't big enough for them. They set up headquarters in Cuba, and so Cuba will become the focal point, the starting point for the Spanish adventurers in this story. But there was another event in 1492, which is often overlooked, but it was also very important, and important for our story as well, because ever since the year 711 AD, most of southern Spain was under Muslim control, okay? Now, sometimes it was one Muslim kingdom, sometimes it was several Muslim kingdoms. They would fight each other, and the Christians. But obviously enough, most of the southern population became Muslim, of course, being under Muslim occupation. And the Spanish in the early 1400s united their strength, and they stopped fighting each other, and they began a powerful southward military push. They wanted to expel the Muslim powers. Now, obviously, they're not going to expel all the Muslim people, but the leadership. They wanted politically all of Spain to be under Catholic control. And of course, two very pious Catholics, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, married each other. And by marrying each other, they unified Spain into one country. And their one goal, well, they had many goals actually, but their main goal was to expel the caliphate, get the caliphate out of the last Muslim stronghold, which was Granada, which today is owned by the British. The Spanish don't even own it today, oddly enough. But Granada is a rock fortress right at the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. And please come in. And of course, it controls access between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, so it's very key to hold it. So, but King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella in 1492, they captured Granada. Now, the Spanish, I'm not saying that they were all the time very nice people or holy people, but they were intelligent people. They learned the lesson of the Crusades, and this is a fact which is often forgotten. Okay, the Christian attempt to recapture the Holy Land ended in complete and dismal failure. The Muslims recaptured the Holy Land and expelled the Christian knights, Christian leadership. And so now, why did that happen? Why is it that the Christians could not hold on to the Holy Land? The reason is because when the Christians conquered the Holy Land, they made no attempt, absolutely no attempt, to convert the local inhabitants to the Catholic faith. I don't know why that was the case, but there was no desire, there was no drive to convert the local people, who were mostly Muslim. I mean, you had some Jews and other groups there as well, but mainly Muslim. And no attempt was made. Now, what that meant was whenever there was a war between the Muslims and the Christians could never rely on the local people for support, because the local people, of course, would always sympathize with the Muslims. And so the Spanish learned that lesson, and they realized if you conquer a territory, you're only going to hold it if you convert the local people. They learned the lesson of the Crusades. So when King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella conquered the last strongholds of southern Spain, they knew that there were millions of Muslims under their control, and they made the decision: we are going to convert these people. We're not going to just have millions of Muslims living in the south ready to rise up in rebellion. And in fact, they did in fact rise up in rebellion a few times. But and I know what the Catholic haters are going to say. They're going to say these were all forced conversions. Well, okay, whenever you're talking about millions of people, there's always abuses. So certainly, hundreds of thousands of Spanish orchestrating, the bringing priests and trying to keep the peace. Probably there were a few cases of forced conversion, but I don't think that happened very much. That typically was not the Spanish way. The Spanish, what Spanish would do, there were a few cases of bad forced conversion, but not many. Mostly what they did was they bring in lots of missionaries, they bring in lots of priests and Dominicans and Franciscans to preach the word of God. And also they, so that, while they won't really kill you for being a Muslim, they won't, kick you out of your house or anything, but you can't become mayor of your town if you're not Catholic. You can't get a job at the court if you're not Catholic. You can't rise in society if you're not Catholic. So they just kind of arrange things so that everyone, one way or another, for one reason or another, would want to be Catholic, you see? So that was more of the Spanish way. Certainly there were a few abuses, I can't deny it. There were a few cases of explicit forced conversion, but not many. Usually it was just kind of enhanced encouragement, I guess you could call it. What the Spanish learned was that, in the Spanish mind, of course we find it crazy, mindset is people conquer them military, the territory, and you bring in the militaries. Now today, we would say that's not the way you do it, but they were a different time, different people. One thing that you will learn from this history lesson is that our ancestors were imperfect. And for me personally, it's a waste of time to just spend all day judging the mistakes of our ancestors. Our ancestors could easily make just as bad of judgments against us in our day and age. Like for example, we justly criticize a lot of the Spanish soldiers for being racist against the Indians, and that is a just criticism. That was wrong. But if they could look at our society, they would say a 50% divorce rate. 50%? Are you kidding me? Don't you care about your children? Why do you tolerate 50% of marriages ending in divorce? Okay, so if we could talk to our Spanish ancestors, they would criticize us just as much as we criticize them. I mean, it would go both ways. So we need to be a little more humble when we when we evaluate our ancestors, especially the Spanish. Spain was the most Catholic country in Europe at the time. They had a very strongly entrenched Catholic system. Everyone believed the Catholic faith, from the king all the way down to the lowest stable boy. And no one doubted it. No one thought to doubt it. Everyone believed it. Everyone believed it firmly. And they all believed that they had a need to spread the faith wherever they went. So the Spanish were very missionary-minded. Of course, they were also very military-minded, but, no one can be perfect at everything. I mean, no one can be perfect all the time. So that's where the Spanish are. The Spanish and their mindset is you spread the gospel by first warfare, then with conversion, by bringing in priests and monks and such. You need to occupy the territory first. So that was their mindset. Okay. Now we're going to go back in time to another date, another key date. A little bit before 1492 is 1487. Now this day is kind of forgotten in history because, see, because of modern political situation, it's considered acceptable to beat up the Catholic Church. Talk about how bad the Catholics were. people just kind of tend to gloss over the atrocities committed by other groups of people. Year 1487, capital that today is Mexico City. They had just constructed their biggest pyramid. It was big, it was huge. I can't remember the Aztec name. They called it Templo Mayor, the Great Temple. Okay, but they had just finished the biggest temple area. They decided to consecrate it in a big, huge ceremony. Now, today, when we build a new church, Bishop Kemi will come out with some oil, and he'll say a mass, and he'll pour oil on the altar and bless it, and that is how we consecrate a church in more modern Catholic theology. For the Aztecs, they consecrated the Templo Mayor by, over the course of 4 days, murdering 80,000 people. Over like 4 days. That was their consecration. Happened in the year 1487. There was I don't know if he was in the capital city, but there was a young man, he was a young man at the time. I can't remember his Aztec name, but he would later be known as Juan Diego. And he was alive at the time. He would have been about 20 at this time. And I don't know what he thought about it. Certainly he rejected the whole idea as an old man, but as a young man, I don't know what he thought about it. But keep Juan Diego in mind, he'll come back later in the story. So yeah, we have this other civilization to talk about, and that's the Aztec Empire. Who were the Aztecs anyway? Well, they were a northern tribe that had migrated south. And when they reached the south, now keep in mind this is happening over the course of like 200 years. When they reached the south, they completely adopted the religion, the culture, the mythology of the local people, especially the local Mayan people. The Mayans are the old race in this area. They're old. The Aztecs used the Mayan calendar. The Aztecs believed the Mayan religion. The Aztecs, they completely adopted the entirety of Mayan religion, culture. They kept their own language, obviously. Nahuatl is the Aztec language, but their religion was completely Mayan all the way. They used the Mayan calendar. So if you ever Google symbol of Mexico, you'll get this stone, this round stone, which is a calendar stone. It's actually a Mayan stone. It's actually not Aztec. I mean, if it was Aztec, it was copied after a Mayan calendar. So the Mayans were very advanced. They had reading and writing. They had medicine. They had architecture. And the Aztecs took all of that and improved it. They made it better. So the Aztecs were very intelligent people. They were very smart. Their calendar was excellent, precise. They could read and write. They had medicine, good medicine. They had, now some people might say, well, they didn't have steel. Well, I'm not sure they needed steel. They had obsidian. And I don't know if you know anything about obsidian. It's a volcanic glass. And it is, if you hit it on the side real hard, it will break. But if it doesn't break, it's deadly sharp, very sharp. And it's just as good as steel. Now, it's not as good as break more easily, but if it doesn't break, it's very sharp. So they had obsidian, which was just as sharp as steel. And they were an incredibly smart people. They even invented a new kind of agriculture, which was unknown in Europe. I don't know what we would call it. I guess you could call it a floating garden. They had all these lakes, you know, and a guy would own his own garden, except it was floating. And he would float around the lake, and he would sell his vegetables, you know. And then I'm assuming he would float up and down rivers too. But that, of course, that was not known in Europe. Anything like that was unknown in Europe. But they invented their own floating garden system. And But the lesson we're going to learn today is that sometimes smart people can go totally whacked out crazy. And that's the truth, okay? So we have to admit it. I mean, the Aztecs had just gone totally lunatic. I'm sorry. There's no nice way to say it. You just have to say it. And why? What was going on? What was their lunacy? Well, okay. So the Aztecs, they believed in many different gods, and they believed in two gods specifically. The gods, obviously, but there's two keep back of Quetzalcoatl. Sorry, there's not. You can that makes it easy. Coatl. Now, who was he? Quetzalcoatl was both a man and a dragon, or a big snake. He had two forms. He sometimes appeared as a man, sometimes appeared as a dragon. And according to their mythology, according to their thinking, both Aztec and Maya, remember they had the same religion, the Quetzalcoatl was a white man. Yeah, he had a beard, like me. Okay, he and his people, who were also white, wore helmets. And they came to the Mayan territory, and they brought civilization. Okay, and they taught the local people how to read and write, how to. And Quetzalcoatl later said, "I have to leave, but don't worry, someday I'll come back." And his people asked him, "When will you come back?" And what he said was, "I will come back in the year 1 reed." Okay, and in the calendar system, remember it works like a circle. 1 reed occurs every 52 years, I think, or 53. So he said, "I will come back in year 1 reed." Okay, now because of this myth, even long before the Europeans showed up, in the Aztec and Mayan mindset, white skin and beards were considered a sign of sanctity, godliness, holiness, sacredness. The Indians, of course, the Maya and the Aztecs were very dark-skinned, but if they could be white-skinned, they would. And obviously they couldn't grow very good beards, but they could grow little scraggle beards. But anyone who could grow a scraggle was considered ugly because he was light, okay, because he had a little bit of a beard. And now I have to stop here. Okay, I know in today's day and age, this sounds like horrible, horrible racism. Okay, I know it sounds terrible to say, but don't blame me. I didn't make it up. This is what the Aztecs and Maya actually wrote in their work. Okay, so they stuff down, not me. Just quoting them, But they themselves said, "We think that white skin is so cool," and they. So they believe that their main god is Quetzalcoatl, and he is a man. He also appears as a snake or a dragon. And now I ask ourselves a question. Okay, worshipped. Does that sound like anyone we know? Yes, you're making the right connection. Okay, yes, there's a definite demonic element in here, in this religion of theirs. The evil snake, it demands human sacrifice, yes. So that's one false god to keep track of. The other is Huitzilopochtli. Okay, don't worry, there's not going to be a name quiz at the end of the class, but you can think of him as God H, if that makes Huitzilopochtli. And now Huitzilopochtli is the sun, S-U-N. And the Aztecs were convinced, probably because Quetzalcoatl told them, that Huitzilopochtli would go out if he was not fed blood. Human sacrifice is always wrong, but imagine someone once a year we got thousands of human hearts. The pyramids, don't Egyptian pyramids. What they would find test. You have to understand how often to understand why this acted the way they did. So what well, they're not sacrificing except for rituals. Subject nation. Soldiers would go out to the countryside, the occupied nations, and they would collect normal taxes, cocoa beans, mats, fruit. They would also collect taxes of people. They would compel to turn over people to be sacrificed in the temples. And now, according to the Aztec, anyone, with one, they have to be young. You're not going to sacrifice someone who's 8. Happen. Physically handsome, but young, even children. And they would bring these men, women, and children to the capital. One by one, they would march them up the steps. Okay, please forgive me, I know it's gross. They would take their obsidian knives. Okay, they would out. The text said they imagine them eating 4,000. They took a little piece of each heart, a little tiny piece, and they ate. And I'm assuming they just threw away. Then they rolled the body down the other side of the pyramid, and when it was bottom, there were soldiers. They archaeological skulls. We know about them from. They would just have these piles of skulls. But the head up and skulls. And the thing about what so for day. Is and 10 long. It's normal to walk to the marketplace stepping over blood. For you to go into the marketplace and haggle over carrot prices, in the background there is no the screen be buying and there's just stepping, and this is all normal. Imagine. You have to do a thought experiment. You have to do a go to 10, and you had to go. At the time, cocoa was not made it into like a coffee-like substance, a drink. They drink cocoa. And you go into a cocoa shop and drink cocoa with the Aztecs. They would seem perfectly normal. They would talk about their grandkids, talk about what they own, they talk about the plot of land they want to buy. If you were to sit down at a cocoa shop in the main capital and drink cocoa with them, they would seem completely normal. Never know that they are of the most horrific atrocities. But they were. That's a very humbling lesson in human nature, isn't it? Okay? So this is the death cult that has gripped Mexico. We have to be honest. You know, I'm like everyone else, I'm a big defender of the Native American tribes. I'm a defender of their history. I think that a lot of the forced westernization that occurred in North America anyway was just brutal and unjust. But we have to make an exception here. Here we have to say, okay, I mean, this is one Native American culture that just spun totally out of control. Okay, their religion, their practice of their religion was just pure demonic. We all have to admit that. And in fact, if someone didn't intervene, I mean, think about it. I mean, just use numbers. Think about it. Eventually, they would have murdered themselves into extinction. If someone didn't invade and stop it, they eventually would have just wiped themselves out. That's exactly what would have happened had not someone come. And that's what happened. Someone did come. So let's go back to the Spanish. Okay. So we're going to meet a new individual. His name, a soldier, Hernan Cortez. What about Hernan? He's not a saint. He's not a saint. He'll never have the halo of sanctity around his head. He'll never be listed in the lives of the saints. But either, as you'll see in this, he did care about people. He did care about the innocent as much as he could anyway. So he wasn't a brutal monster. He was in between. He was in between holiness and Joseph Stalin. Okay, so he was in between the two. But what I can tell you is that he was very ambitious and he was a genius. He was smart, probably smarter than everyone in this room. He was a very, very smart man, very intelligent. Now, Hernan Cortez was a Spanish soldier. He ended up, like lots of Spanish soldiers, he ended up in Cuba. And in Cuba, the progression of the church was going quite well. But you have to understand, okay, you may wonder, how did the Spanish conquer the Indian tribes? Because if you think about it, I mean, if you just do numbers, yeah, the Spanish have muskets, but Indians outnumber the Spanish 10-1. So muskets are pretty awful the first encounter, but after like the 20th encounter, they're not so horrible anymore. How did they do it? Well, I'll tell you how they did it was the Spanish had a tactic. It was called capture the chief. So the Spanish knew that they and conquer for Cuba muskets alone. Okay, so how do they conquer even muskets? They still had clubs and bows and arrows, so those are pretty impressive up close. How do you conquer someone who outnumbers you 10-1? Well, with the Spanish, what I was try, like at the middle, they would send in what today we would call commandos. They called them something else then, but highly trained, very aggressive military operatives. These commandos would go into the Indian village of the most powerful Indian tribe. They would go to the chief's house. They would break into the chief's house. They would kidnap him. And if anyone tried to stop him, they'd kill him. And then they'd rush out. And then they would say, okay, we have your chief captive. Now you have to do what we say. Okay? So that was their tactic called capture. Today, we would say it's really horrible the gospel. Well, yeah, I would agree with that. But they did what they did, okay? Keep in mind, the Spanish did a lot of bad things. A lot of the people they were conquering were just as bad as they were. So, you know, yeah, you have to keep that in mind. And also you have to understand the mindset of the Spanish soldiers. The Spanish soldiers at the time had this people as the Spanish soldiers, what they thought, they were thinking is, you know, some conquer the Indian tribe, and I can tax their businesses. You know, I can be in good graces of the King of Spain, and then I'll be rich, and that would be cool. I would be really, because that was just cool. And then I'll bring in priests. The priests will convert the people, and then God will be happy with me too. You see? That's the way they were thinking. Kill two birds with one stone. Okay, I'm not saying this is great theology. All I'm saying is this is how they thought. Okay? You conquer the Indian tribe, you get rich, you convert the people, then you get to go to heaven too. Because God's happy with you. Because, you know, you converted all these people. Okay? So, yeah, that's how they were thinking. And Cortez, of course, was in that mindset. Now, the Spanish started hearing rumors about this big civilization across the Gulf of Mexico, you know, and they heard strange rumors. You see, the people, the Indians they had encountered were all very, very low level in terms of civilization, Stone Age level. But they heard that there's a civilization out there where the people definitely are advanced. They got writing, they got huge cities, they got pyramids, they have, you know, medicine and astronomy. And the Spanish thought, this sounds pretty crazy. But they sent out some small expeditions which explored the Mayan coast and the Mexican coast, and they had a few encounters, mostly violent encounters with the locals. And they confirmed that there was something there. And then the Spanish soldiers came back. Now keep in mind, it wasn't year one read, so in the Mayan and Aztec mindset, this is not Quetzalcoatl because he said he'll come back in year one read. Okay, so Cortez gets irritated. He goes to the governor and he says, okay, that little tiny pinprick we did wasn't good enough. We just confirmed that it's there. We need to send an expedition. More men, priests, cannons, more gunpowder, more muskets. And the governor said, Cortez, I'll do that for you. Gave men, several priests, lots of cannons, lots of gunpowder, lots of muskets. And on the very day that Cortez was supposed to set sail, the governor sent a little letter to Cortez. Cortez opened the letter, and it said, don't go. I'll talk to you later. And I don't know why the governor changed his mind. Who knows? But Cortez never shared that letter. Now, only that the governor had revoked his mission. Now, this is important to keep in mind. Why is this important? Because now knows to win or he's going to be hanged. Idiots. Now, obviously, to death, the governor's going to hang him. Okay? Now, this explains a lot of what Cortez does. So, Cortez and his men sail off to find this civilization. Now, in the meantime, remember I mentioned those small Spanish soldier expeditions that had just pinpricked the Mayan territory and the Aztec territory? Well, one of those expeditions shipwrecked in the south, in Mayan territory. And 12 because they were to defend themselves, and the Lord said, light-skinned, how cool. Them to the gods. Okay, so they captured them, and they sacrificed all but 2 to the gods. And the 2 they didn't sacrifice, the priest and the soldier, was because they were ugly to sacrifice. Yeah, I'm not making it up. That actually happened. So, okay, so you have, and so what do? Well, they just kind of live there. All their comrades are dead. They have no means of getting back to Cuba, so they're just stuck. Well, the local soldier marries a local priest, so he learned to speak Mayan. Okay? Keep in mind, the soldier, the priest, they can speak Spanish, they can speak Mayan. Okay. Now we have to meet a new person. She's an Aztec girl. I can't remember her original name, forgive me, but she was later called Malinche, like that translates to something like the female trader or whatever. But her name, she had an original Aztec name, I can't remember it, but she was called Malinche. Now, her story is weird, but it's true. So, the Aztecs were big believers in, with the cow. Were evil, as evil you could ever be. And Malinche was born on that day. And it was so bad that the local Aztec shaman looked at the baby girl and said, this girl is so evil that she's going to grow up and like destroy or almost destroy the Aztec Empire. Kill her. Why didn't they kill her? Girl. I assume under Tlaloc. Okay? And they probably thought that if we kill her, then Tlaloc will get revenge against us. Okay, that's my theory. I can't prove that, but that's the only explanation I can think of as to why they didn't kill her. So she grows up to age 10 with the Aztecs. Now, Aztecs, like I said, are smart. Aztecs trying to keep good relations with the Mayans. The Aztecs decide to give some gifts to the Mayans, and they give them lots of slave girls. And one of the slave girls is Malinche. Kind of like, why should she bring her curses on us? Let's give her to the Mayans, and she can bring all of her curses on them. And that's what they did. This is a of Malinche, the 10-year-old girl of Wednesday. Yeah, evil. So she a gift. Speaks both Aztec, and she's in the same village as the priest soldier who speaks in Spanish. See how these connections are being made? Okay. Cortez is and in Spanish interpreters time for two one he could be Quetzalcoatl, the god. 2, him and his men have lots of guns and swords. Okay, you can't quite sacrifice them. So, now, the Mayans ingratiate with as the Aztec priests who were killing people on the temples, but they were still pretty rotten people. And so the Spanish soldiers are just so excited, and because they have all these so I was improvement to the situation. I don't know. Either way, okay. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of these men later on did indeed marry these girls, and just because they took them on as a concubine doesn't mean that they were abusive to the girl. So I'm not saying it was okay. I'm just saying. So, Malaysia is, but Cortez, Malaysia, and speak my Aztec or Nahuatl. So Malinche is just very smart, and so vanished very quickly anyway, just because she's a very smart person. Okay, like I said, the timing of the landing of Cortez is very ominous because it is, which only happens every years. So, as that first expedition, because read, doesn't matter if they're white, but this time it is year one read. So there's a huge religious hesitancy to attack them now because maybe they're gods. It's a Guadalupe. They're white beards. They're wearing helmets. Very Polish. So now Aztec go here. But part of the problem is their emperor. Their emperor, his name, every of his name. It's either Montezuma or Moctezuma, whatever. Either name works, and there's 15 other versions too. But anyhow, Montezuma, if that's how you pronounce his name, Montezuma is a very indecisive person himself. So he's watching these white men with beards getting closer and closer to the capital. And he thinks to himself, okay, they might be invaders, kind of like the ones we saw last year, or they might really be gods. You know, I don't want to commit blasphemy by killing a god. Okay, don't want to do that. Okay, so he's indecisive. He does nothing. Okay, now Cortez, in the meantime, is doing lots of stuff. Okay, so he's marching closer and closer to the capital city. Now, everywhere he stops, what happens is there's at first a violent encounter with the locals, but then Cortez sends a messenger over to the says, "Look, we're on the side. We both want to take down the Aztecs. Why fight us? Why not join us?" Okay? So that's his political ploy. And plus, Cortez are quite nice. He's Kate's. Cortez is already aware of the legend, and he's playing it. So, marching towards the city, the army is getting bigger and bigger. Nations join for a minute. Why? All the Indian nations hate the Aztecs. Can anyone hazard a guess? Be any cause, any reason why they all hated the Aztecs? Could it have something to do with the 4,000 on the temple? And could it be the yes, reason hated the Aztecs? Nations were slowly being decimated by the Aztecs. So Cortez is getting this huge army that are the Indian allies marching. Now Cortez hits gold when he reaches central Mexico, and he reaches a place called Tlaxcala. Now Tlaxcala was an independent kingdom. They were surrounded by the Aztecs, but because of the mountainous terrain, the Aztecs had not yet conquered Tlaxcala. In fact, I mean, they were trying to, but Cortez showed up. Now, at first, the Tlaxcalans fought Cortez, but Cortez, of course, sent his emissaries over there, and he won over the Tlaxcalans. Sorry, I mean, there's not going to be a quiz at the end of the talk. And the Tlaxcalans were the biggest ally, the best ally that Cortez had. Now, Cortez is smart. Okay, all this time, he's running out of gunpowder. So what does he do? He knows he can't get more gunpowder from Cuba. He builds his own gunpowder factory. He's a man. He finds chemicals, just make it here. And so his men set up their own factories to make gunpowder, to make bullets, so that even in Mexico, Cortez is always resupplied. Like I said, he's very smart. He knows what he's doing. Okay, so it takes a long time. But eventually, Cortez makes it to the capital city. You have to understand what the city looks like. For one thing, Cortez and his men are astounded. They had never seen a city so big. They had never seen a city so beautiful. They had never seen a city so sophisticated. It was amazing. The city it was a huge lake. But on is but all is back down. Some people. Okay, so that is what Tenochtitlan looked like at the time. So the emperor comes out to meet Cortez. Cindy, can I get a glass of water, please? Thank you. But he decided to try the nice path first. Nice. Now, military to kill in this matter. Moctezuma was by niceness first. He yes. Him Coatl. He's waiting for you 3,000 years for you to come back, because that's how long the prophecy had been around. It was 3,000 years. Please come into the city. So Cortez and the Spanish, not the Indians stay outside. The Indian allies stay outside. Cortez and his 300 men go inside the city, and they're given a palace. That's their palace. And the emperor rolls out the red carpet. Treats him very well. Gives girls, gives him nice beds to sleep on. And so for the night. Next day, Moctezuma decides to give Cortez a tour of Mexico City and show him the sights, especially the temples. Thank you, Cindy. By the way, I'm sure you're wondering what year this is. This is the year 1521. Okay, I should have. This is the year 1521. Okay, so let me get some water first. Now, that probably was a mistake to give Cortez a tour, especially of the temples. He saw the towers, skulls. Let's be honest. He even saw bodies of children. And the whole time he's walking around, the screaming, from the people being sacrificed. And of course, he's also a pious Catholic, so he's seeing all these idols everywhere. And eventually, Cortez loses it, and he tells Montezuma, look, your gods are evil. Your human sacrifice is evil. Your religion is demonic. It is the devil. Now, can you blame Cortez for saying that? He's just seen hundreds of dead bodies lying around, he's seeing the rivers of blood. And he tells Montezuma, you need to convert and embrace Jesus Christ and beg for forgiveness of your sins. Now, of course, all this is going through an interpreter, but the message is taken well. Montezuma is insulted, and he says, I don't like the fact that you say that. That's very insulting. You need to go back to your palace. So Cortez and his men go back to the palace, and Cortez realizes he might be in danger. He might have ticked off the emperor so much that the emperor will attack him. The Aztecs outnumber him 100 to 1. They do have muskets, but that will only help you out so long. So he decides to do that classic Spanish trick, kidnap the chief. That's what he does. He's probably at night. I'll have to go back and double check the records as to what time of day it happened, but probably in the middle of the night. A whole bunch of his men go to the palace of the emperor. They break in, they grab the emperor, they drag him back to the palace, and they hold him ransom. And the next day, Cortez greets the Aztec people and says, hey everyone, guess what? I have your emperor in captivity, and we can kill him whenever we want. So, to keep your emperor alive, he is going to order you to bring in lots of gold, lots of gold. And that was what Cortez was after. So yeah, we have to admit Cortez had a greedy side. There's no point denying the flaws of his character. So yeah, he had a greedy side, and his men with him. Okay, so yeah, that was there. And so the Aztec people are very eager to protect their emperor, so they start bringing in all the gold. You have to keep in mind, in the Aztec economy, gold was not money. Gold was, decoration. Cocoa beans were money. That's what you used to buy things with. Gold was just, you put it on to look pretty. You put it on a statue. It wasn't decoration. So Cortez is getting all this gold pumped into the palace. Now, in the meantime, 2 years have gone by now, and the governor in Cuba and a bigger expedition, 600 men, to go to Mexico and get Cortez and bring him back. Now, the ships land, and the Spanish come out. At this point, the Indians are rather familiar with who the Spanish were. They quickly figure out what's going on, and Cortez has lots of Indian allies, so some of those Indian allies run to this capital city and tell Cortez, hey, your boss has come knocking. Cortez goes, oh no. So, as he takes 200 of his men, and he goes rushing to the coast. Cortez has an advantage. He's been in Mexico for 2 years. He knows what Mexican weather is like. These newbies don't know that. So, taking advantage of the weather and his knowledge of it, and using a night attack, Cortez rushes into the Spanish camp and captures their leader. All right? And then Cortez, the next morning, greets all the Spanish soldiers and says, okay, guys, I'm very sorry I had to do that. I had to capture your leader. That's really bad. I know you're here to arrest me. And you can arrest me and go back to Cuba and get your standard daily pay. Or you can come with me and get a mountain of gold in Mexico City. What do you think they chose? Yes, So they decided to throw in their lot with Cortez because, he's offering them more than just, the standard Spanish normal rituals that they do all the time. And some of our Spanish soldiers were out in the city watching them do their rituals, and they got a young boy. They dressed him in these flowery garments, and they carried him on one of those palisades, you carry people on. And they took him to an altar, and they killed him. And one of our Spanish soldiers was so disgusted and so horrified, and he said, these people are killing children. He pulled his sword, he attacked that parade, hoping to save the child if the child could be saved. And then there was a tussle, and Aztecs and Spanish were slashing at each other, and one of the Spanish soldiers fell down dead. And then the Aztecs realized, hey, guess what, guys? They can die. That means they're not gods. And once the Spanish realized that we aren't gods, they went into total riot mode. And they started rebelling and attacking us. And we've been, besieged here in the palace. So in the meantime, yes, that's what happened. The Spanish had been horrified at a sacrifice of a little boy. They had reacted, hoping to save the boy. I don't think the boy lived. I think the boy did in fact die. But so now the city's in turmoil, and Cortez has to get out. The Aztecs have at this point in time, the emperor is killed. Now it's very controversial how he died. We don't know how he died. They've already got a new emperor, so he's not one. Aztecs, and they stoned him to death. The Aztecs say the Spanish realized they couldn't use the emperor anymore, so they killed him. Which one is right? I don't know. Both accounts are there. We don't know who actually killed the emperor. So, either way, the emperor is dead. Night falls. Cortez knows that as soon as dawn comes, the Aztecs have a new emperor. They will all be. He realized little bridges, they're all taken up. So, okay. So what to do? Here's what he does. He starts pulling wood out of the house that he's in, and he builds his own bridge. That's what they use. They go out, they put it down, they all walk across, they pick it up, carry it to the next causeway, put it down, walk across. Okay, so now they got halfway through, and then the Aztecs figured out what they were doing. And then in the canoes, the Aztecs come ambushing the Spanish, about 300 of them. And so it's night, it's dark, and the Aztecs are jumping out of their canoes and attacking the Spanish. The Spanish, of course, are shooting back and slashing back. A lot of the Spanish are weighed down with treasure, so if they simply fall into the water, they get pulled down and they drown. And Cortez does manage to fight his way out of the city, but he lost 2/3 of the 300 men they had with him, so about 200 men. And after he got out, Cortez crawled to a tree. He leaned against the tree, and he wept and wept and wept all night until the sun came up. And I'm sure these were authentic tears because he lost a lot of friends that night. A lot of his dear friends died. Now, Cortez, the next morning, well, let me stop. For whatever reason, the Aztecs could have attacked right then and defeated Cortez outside of the city. They did not. Why? I don't know. I have a guess. My guess is it was at that began small. I right then, gas small was going. Okay. The local again, like, so now we have statistics. We have no census data, but population side of smallpox. So you have 90, but it was bad. I would say 1/2 Indians died. So I think didn't attack right there while we're dealing with smallpox. Okay. Now, meanwhile, Cortez has a council of war to talk about what to do next. And he has different options. One is to go back to Cuba. Now, if he goes back to Cuba, he gets hanged. So he doesn't want to do that. Or he could keep fighting. But to keep fighting, he needs that'll take renew, more gunpowder, bullets, guns. He also thinks to himself, okay, it's an island city. To conquer an island city, boats. So he has lots of ships armed with cannons. Okay? So Cortez, then after like a month of preparation, he goes on the offensive. And bloody and brutal. After both ex Cortez by now, a Spanish soldier, big split, sacrificing him on the sea. That just made Cortez and his men more angry. But finally, after island, they finally kill the island, they kill and they have won. And Cortez breathes a sigh of relief. He's not going to be hanged. So he starts sending letters back to the Cuban governor and back to the king of Spain, saying, I have conquered a whole new kingdom for you of Spain. And I'm sending two. Okay. So Cortez is one. Cortez in human sacrifice has to abolish the old religion, and he says, this whole religion, all of your gods, they're all abolished. We're going to destroy every idol. We're going to smash every image of these gods. We're going to burn every manuscript that you own. All of your writing, it's all going to go up in flames. Now, today, of course, people throw tomatoes at him for that, but can you blame him? I mean, he had walked through Mexico City seeing piles of bodies of children. You know, he saw the rivers of blood. He saw the pyramids of skulls. I think not many of us in his situation, in his shoes, would have done any different, if we were honest. So Cortez wins. He wants to convert the local people. So the Spanish, and he starts bringing in lots of priests, lots of monks, lots of Catholics to teach the Catholic faith to the local people. They tear down every temple, and whenever they can, they put a church on top of the site of the old temple. And so this is what they do. And for 10 years, any conversions. Okay. Now, why is that? Well, there's a really easy explanation why that is. Okay. We have to be very honest. We have to be very humble as Catholics. The Spanish soldiers were not great people. Okay, they weren't. No, they weren't as bad as the Aztec priests who were killing children on their altars, but they were still bad. Okay, so the lesser bad guy had killed the worst bad guy, but the lesser bad guy is still a bad guy. Okay, so the Spanish soldiers were not nice. They were brutal. They were vicious, and so wasn't a lot of love between the Aztec people because the Spanish soldiers were just so mean. Now, the Spanish priests did try and restrain soldiers, but it didn't do much good. I mean, after all, they're just priests. I mean, they don't own weapons or guns. They can't force the Spanish soldiers to not do something. So for 10 years, there's almost no conversions. But two men did convert to the Catholic faith. One was named Juan Bernardino. Can't remember his Aztec name. And his nephew, Juan Diego. Can't remember his Aztec name. They were both in their 50s. They were both widowers. They had been married before, but their wives had died many years beforehand. They both were baptized into the Catholic faith, and they were both very devoted to the Catholic faith. Juan Diego, he was a mat maker. And you know what mats are. I mean, you scrape your feet on mats. So he did not make a luxury product. He was not rich. He was a poor man. And he was an old man, too, by Aztec standards, in his 50s. He was very devoted to the Mass. He would walk 8 miles a day to go to Mass in the morning, walk back. 4 miles there, 4 miles. I imagine that he got up at 4 and just started walking to the chapel. Took him like 2.5 hours to get there. He would attend Mass, walk 2.5 hours back to his village, and start his day. Start selling mats. Now, of course, I complain when I have to get up at 6 to say Mass for the nuns at 6:30, but, you know, Juan Diego's getting up at 4 in December when it's cold to walk to Mass. Now, 1 December, 1531, December 1531, December 12th, actually. Juan Diego is on his way to Mass, and he always walks over the hill of Tepeyac. He lives near Mexico City. He always walks over the hill of Tepeyac. Now, Tepeyac, there had been a Aztec temple there dedicated to the mother goddess, but the Spanish had torn it down. And while he's walking over the hill, he meets a woman, an amazing woman. For one thing, she's dressed like an Aztec princess. She's dressed like a pregnant Aztec princess. And she even looks Aztec. And the woman speaks to him in Aztec. I am the mother of God. And she says, I want you to go to the bishop, that I temple here in my face. He goes to see the bishop, and you know how easy it is to see the bishop. And he has to wait a long time. But the bishop finally lets him in. And you can imagine the conversation. Juan Diego goes in, says, oh, dear Bishop Zamaraga, great to see you. I was walking to Mass this morning, and I met the Mother of God, and she said she wants a church built in her honor. Isn't that great? And how do you think the bishop reacted? Yes. He said, go away, Juan Diego. Okay, he was not. So he so the next day, he goes again. The woman says, go back, ask the bishop again. Juan Diego goes back, sees the bishop, asks him again. And the bishop says, Juan Diego, stop drinking the tequila. You know. And finally, the bishop, Juan Diego, can say, see God, but you need to leave it without a miracle. So, Juan Diego goes home dejected. He walks into his home, and his uncle, Juan Bernardino, is on his bed and he's dying. And he says, Juan Diego, run to Mexico City, get a priest. I need to go to confession before I die. So, Juan Diego goes running to Mexico City. He comes to the hill. He realizes, I can't stop. I don't have time to stop and talk to the lady. So he on the hill. And guess who he meets? The lady. And you still have the big one. My lady. Today, because I have to go get a priest for my uncle. He's dying. And the lady says, Juan Diego, why don't you trust me? You should always trust me. I am your mother. Of your Our Lady says, a miracle. So, and there's all these roses blooming, okay? They're not just roses. Continent. She gets these red, beautiful roses. Now, at the time, Indians wore like a thing, and you could lift up the poncho like an apron and put things in it if you wanted to. So that's what Juan Diego does. He holds up his poncho, and roses are ears to Juan. Juan, what is your name? And Spanish. We hear the Spanish Guadalupe. What does it mean in Aztec? It means she who crushes the head of the false serpent god. That's what it means. She who crushes the head of the serpent. That's what it means in Aztec. So, go over and the roses fall and roses. In fact, we don't know what happened to the roses. They're lost to history. Whatever happened to them, we don't know. The reason no one's looking at the roses is because everyone was looking at the tilma. Because on the tilma was the most amazing image. The image of a woman in prayer. Dressed like an Aztec empress. Dressed like a pregnant Aztec empress, though she still wore the collar of the Virgin. Okay? And she was in prayer, which meant that she is not God. And in fact, the sun is not God. False, you know? She's on is. Well, on her, you can't see it close, but you can see it, is a cross. So she's saying, the Catholic God, the one God, and I am his mother. Juan Diego immediately sees the significance of everywhere. This image and the behind it, the news spreads like wildfire. And soon the Aztec people and people are coming in their hundreds of thousands to see the tilma. And they realize that the mother of God, the mother of the one true God, the Spanish God, has come to offer peace, healing, and forgiveness to the Aztec people, the Indian peoples. And the Aztec and Indian peoples, in their thousands, and their hundreds of thousands, and eventually in their millions, are converted to the Catholic faith. Within 30 years, something like 95% of the Aztec Empire, the former Aztec Empire, has become Catholic. All because of that image, and all because of that of Juan Diego. In fact, to this day, in terms of numbers, Juan Diego is the single most successful missionary in all of church history. He brought something like 10 million people into the church in his lifetime. Okay, I'm sorry this was a very long talk, but I do open up for questions. Okay. Okay. Went back to Spain, he got married, he had another family. He always considered Martin one of his sons. He did not disown him, he did not treat him any different. Cortez fell out of favor with the king, and he died in poverty in a small town in Spain. And that's how Cortez ended. But there's no denying his significance. All right, God bless you all.